Oh boy, what a great place to kick off this week's Horsepower. Today on the show, we're going to build up a monumental motor. In fact, it's a streetable version of the one that powers this famous door slammer called the Twister. What's more, the owner's going to help us. He's a famous horsepower hero known worldwide as Dr. O's.
The only place you find a helping hand is at the end of your own wrist. No free lunches, there's nothing for nothing, nobody's going to hand you anything, and nobody's going to make you famous. You're going to make yourself famous.
It's that kind of work ethic that made Joe Mondello famous as a racer, engine builder, and technical innovator. Driving his way to comp eliminator championships in the 60s, Joe also had the drive to design better ways to make engine horsepower. By the 1970s, all kinds of race cars were running and winning thanks to his innovative cylinder heads.
Horsepower is limited by the amount of air that can pass through the cylinder head. That is the controlling factor. Period. End of story, and that's the way that works.
In 1968, Mondello started racing for Oldsmobile while also developing specialty engine parts for their 455 big block, hence the name Dr. O's.
They're just self-driven air pumps. But when you do really good cylinder heads on them, now they're dynamically driven.
Dr. O's is now a member of 5 Halls of Fame, and with a legacy like that, he could easily rest on his laurels. But years ago, a new mission emerged.
The lady that you met today, Mary Mondello, said, Joe, I want you to start teaching people what you know, because when you die, it's all going to go in the box with you.
So we decided to open a one-week class. He used to say, learn 40 years in a week. And he tried to cram it all in, too.
Things are turning out good. You got great grinder control. But get around that front part of that guide a little bit better. Yep. When you walk in the front door, you're an engine assembler. When you leave on Friday, you're an engine builder.
Big difference.
That's the difference.
Before we could apply Mondello's magic to our own 455 build, we had to find a decent used block, and we were pretty sure one was waiting under this motor we bought for a few $100. So after a complete tear down and displacing a family of brown recluse spiders, we had the foundation for a true classic motor creation.
After cleaning and magnafluxing the block, we're ready to start the machining process. Now here at the Tech Center, they've got all the latest equipment, and the guys that use it, well, they were trained by Mondello himself, so you know everything's gonna be done right the first time.
After cutting the main caps to shrink the bores about 1,000, the first major step is to line hone the block to make sure the mains are round and straight. Then Brett loads our block in an RNC block surfacer. First, the machine has to probe the block to learn where the holes are. Then it takes out 30 thousandths from each cylinder before the initial pass of surfacing.
Deck surfaces were not square this way, and you can see, being that it touched here and not here, that it wasn't square this way. Also, you're seeing how unflat the deck surface was in the high spots and the low spots there.
After several passes, the machine has taken off about 13 thousandths of surface material. Then David and his son in SV10 take over to hone out the cylinder bores to make them perfectly round with a crosshatch to allow the rings to seat properly.
That's pretty much telling you a basic idea what the bore is looking like.
We're reusing the stock rods, but only after Brett resizes them with new ARP bolts. The stock crankshaft's in pretty good shape, but David will need to do a little drilling to bring it into perfect balance. Then a little polish on the journals, and the crank's ready to go in.
It's about time for the master engine builder himself to take over, and he's got a bag full of tricks and tech gems that'll make any motor last longer and make more power. We set out to build a piece of horsepower history, the Olds 455. By first tearing down a boneyard beast to render a usable bottom end. Then we took the block to Joe Mondello's Tech Center for a complete machining, had the crank balanced, and the stock rods resized for use with new Speed Pro pistons. Now it's time for Dr. O's himself to step in for his basic cleanup porting of our Edelbrock Performer RPM heads.
The biggest thing about doing these heads is mastering this grinder. Because the grinder gets away from people, you gotta have grinder control. Remember, you own the grinder, it doesn't own you.
No doubt who's in charge of the grinder here, and after roughing out the short side radius, time for a little polishing. And here Mondello uses a creation of his own called a flapper stick.
It leaves one consistent texture in the port, which helps to have a much better homogeneous fuel mixture and a lot better straddle layer of incoming fuel in the port runner.
Our heads are also treated to a basic valve job to make sure the valves seal to the combustion chambers, but that's not the only reason.
The different angles on the valve seat are going to change the wet flow characteristics and the dry flow characteristics of the cylinder head. What we're doing here is pressure testing the seat to make sure it's sealing properly. See, we're well into the green here at 0.8.
Back in the porting room, Mondello meticulously deburrs the block to eliminate the smallest possible obstruction of oil flow. Like here, smoothing out an oil hole that lubricates the timing chain.
Done.
He even goes into the water jackets to clean out the rust and calcium.
By getting in there with this thing and cleaning that up, the engine runs cooler through break-in and cooler through the whole life of the engine.
Hey, before we start building up our bottom bed, I want you to meet the real boss of the tech center. This is the Cisco Kid. He's dressed for speed and born to run. Meanwhile, I think the doctor's ready to operate. And the first OR procedure is to knock in the new cam bearings. Before anything else happens, Joe installs the rear main to measure it with a gauge. Hey, check out the tool he invented for getting the main back off. Mondello spent years coming up with innovations that improved the Oldsmobile engine's notorious oil return issues. Well, like the 4 oil restrictors he puts into the mains.
It keeps more oil down in the main bearings and around the rod bearings because of the large capacity of oil flow.
Of course, you have to modify the main bearings in order for the restrictors to work. In goes the cam now, which by the way is a comp hydraulic roller with their special Pro Plasma Nitriding Treatment.
Next, installing special front and back oil galley plugs.
Make sure that the oil galley plug in the back has got a 40 thousandths oiling hole in it. If it's a 3/8 pipe plug, you will burn up the cam and you will burn up the distributor gear. Guaranteed.
Now the crankshaft can go in, along with main caps and ARP bolts. Then using a feeler gauge, he makes sure thrust is between 6 and 12 thousandths.
It's a 6. They check the top and they also check the bottom.
Next, he pulls the crank forward to tighten the bolts before torquing.
90 pounds with Molly.
Joe uses timing gears that change the olds from a slip fit to a press fit setup.
It's plain to see that Mondello doesn't use any part right out of the box. That definitely goes for piston rings. After precisely checking the end gaps, and in many cases grinding them down a little, he uses a special stone to smooth out the sharp edges.
The biggest scratches in a cylinder bore are the sharp edges on these oil rings. This side is for opening and closing events. This side over here is for intake centerline.
Mondello is a strong advocate of degreeing the cam at 4 cylinders, 2 on the right bank and 2 on the left.
If you degree your camshaft, you have worked on the heart of the engine. If the cam timing's right, everything else will fall in place.
After installing the oil pump and pickup, we'll be good to go and finish the build back home at our shop.
Meanwhile, it was mesmerizing to spend a couple of days with this icon of engine building. Still going strong after 50 years of high-performance perfection.
Questions always asked to my wife, when's Joe going to retire? Joe's not going to retire. We're going to have the funeral and a retirement party the same day. So show up. That's the way it's going to work.
Well, our 455 Oldsmobile is back in the shop and ready for us to finish the build next week with all these parts, and hey, we'll even take it back to the dyno and pound on it. You know, I guess it goes without saying, when you build a motor, the best way to save money in the long run is to build it right and build it to last. We certainly witnessed that at Mondello's place. Those guys are meticulous with every step of the process, including degreeing the cam. And why not? When you degree the camshaft, you're making sure it's synchronized with the crankshaft. Well, it's been a while since we've done this drill, so let's review the steps of one of the more popular methods. Of course, you got to have some tools like a degree wheel, a dial indicator, a pointer, and hey, what better use of an old coat hanger than this, and some kind of positive stop device, and you can even make one of these with an old spark plug. With your timing set and cylinder heads installed, rotate the crank clockwise till number 1 piston is at top dead center. Then after aligning the pointer with TDC on the wheel, install the piston stop so the bolt protrudes about an inch. Rotate the crank till it touches the piston stop, record the degree wheel number, and rotate counterclockwise till you contact the stop again. The numbers should match. With the dial indicator mounted to the block and directly over the lifter or intake side spring, rotate the crank clockwise till the lifter is at maximum lift and zero the indicator. Now rotate the crank, and as the lifter moves up, stop when the indicator shows 50 thousandths of rise. Record that number from the degree wheel. Okay, continue rotating past maximum lift till the indicator again shows 50 thousandths and record that number. Both should match the numbers on your cam card. As we saw at Mondello's Tech Center, Joe insists on degreeing at 4 cylinders, 2 on each bank of the motor. So why isn't 1 enough?
Doesn't tell you whether or not the lifter bores are straight. Doesn't tell you whether or not your cam tunnel is straight. Doesn't tell you whether it is slanted front to back. So, when I teach somebody here in my engine blueprinting course, I make all my students degree 4 cylinders. 2 on the right bank, 2 on the left bank.
Oh, well, one thing I've learned over the years is no 2 engine builders do everything exactly the same. But I think they all agree that some degreeing is better than no degreeing. We'll be right back.
A well-prepped block is the critical starting point for any engine build, but it can also be an expensive one when you get your build back from the machine shop. So today, we're going to show you a couple budget tech tips that'll save you money in the short run and extend the life of your block in the long run. For the first one, all we need is a die grinder, a grinding stone, and some burrs. This 5-liter Ford has a good oiling system. However, the oil return holes here in the lifter valley have sharp edges and raised points that can slow the oil down from getting back in the pan. Now using the grinder and the stone, I'm going to chamfer the holes in the valley so the oil has a nice smooth passage back to the pan. With the burr, I'm going to smooth down the area around the rear lifter boards where oil can puddle. Now, be careful not to remove too much material. Remember, we're just smoothing out the rough edges. One more thing, the rough porous surface of the valley can be restrictive itself. So for the icing on the cake, we're just going to cover it with some acrylic enamel to give it a smooth, slick, unrestrictive surface.
Well, now that Mike's icing, or rather paint, has dried, let's be a little bit more block specific. These 5-liter blocks do have one drawback that's worth pointing out. The material here in the lifter valley is pretty thin. At high RPMs, some of these blocks have been known to split, and it usually starts right in the lifter valley. So how does that happen? Well, in a high-performance setup, the engine can actually twist, the cylinders will distort, and since the valley is the weak point, guess where the crack starts? Well, here's an affordable ounce of prevention called a Valley Girdle Pro, and it comes from Horsepower Sales. Now you install them here, bridging the valley, and they strengthen the top of the block, reduce stress, and dampen harmonics. You just tighten down the Allen head bolts, drill 1/4-inch holes at each end of the girdles, tap in these roll pins, and that's it. In addition to Fords, they've got them for other high revving engine applications, any place where a little extra strength might prevent a not so simple twist of fate. Yeah, I don't mind cleaning shop tools. I'll mop the floor. What? I even do windows. There's one place I draw the line though, and that's doing laundry. That's one of the reasons we've given up cloth shop towels for these disposable wipe balls. Now these things are tough and durable even when wet. Check this out. Cast iron manifold, he ain't heavy. They're also absorbent and will soak up just about any oils, greases, or other liquids we throw at them. Now we like the pop-up box here, but like their other towels, you can also get them on a roll.
Any car with a high-performance engine needs a suspension that can handle the straightaways as well as the curves. Now, Addco Engineering has been in the sway bar biz since 1961 with over 2,000 applications. Now, this setup here is for a Mustang, and it's made of sturdy tubular steel. Comes with all the hardware and urethane bushings you need to put it on your ride to keep it handling like a true sports car. Now, the price, well, it's pretty easy to handle too at $300.
Build on a budget. Horsepower projects that save you time and money.
You finally found your dream ride. But after the first night in the driveway, you realize you're still chasing rainbows. Of course, the rainbow in this case is oil. Well, most leaks aren't the result of mechanical failures. In fact, this one could be the result of a pinhole in the oil pan, a less than perfect seal, who knows? Well, to try to find and fix this Camaro's leak, we're going to try out a new product we found called Super Seal. It's actually a two-step process, and the first step is to pour in the ultraviolet dye. After running the motor about 15 minutes, you shut it off and take a UV light to look for the leak. Okay, it looks like we've got a little leak here at the oil pan gasket. Now, time for step 2, the Fix-A-Leak sealer. After that, you just drive the car around a few days, check the source again, and if you don't see green, well, you've saved some green at the repair shop. By the way, a bigger leak might take a second application. Now, Super Seal makes their stop leak stuff for radiators, transmissions, and power steering pumps, and the parent company Quest even makes the UV light that doubles as a flashlight. Right now, I want to leak some information about upcoming horsepower shows. Next week, we've taken on the challenge of hot rodding one of America's most popular police cars, the Dodge Hemi Charger. Later on, we'll correct the gearing in our Turbo Mustang before we take it to the strip for some serious test and tune. See you next time.